That surprised me. Hey, this is Greg McIntyre with McIntyre Elder Law, and welcome to Lunch with a Veteran. I have a veteran here today with me that I'm excited about talking with, and that's Ludy Wilkie. And Ludy, I know a bit about your story, but I'd like everyone else out there to know a bit about your story as well. And the reason we do Lunch with a Veteran is, number one, to showcase veterans. Number two, I think that by preserving these stories and telling these stories, not only are they entertaining, but also I think that they can encourage others and young people to see how they can explore their dreams, even if they go in the military, how the military can help, and just what role it's played in many of our lives, including me, including my life and my time in the Navy.
Well, you know, Greg, the military certainly helped me.
Okay.
I finished college in 1969 at Western Carolina. I wanted to go on to graduate school, but just did not have the money.
Right.
So the only option that seemed to be available was enlisting in the Army and getting the GI Bill, the GI Bill of Rights. I worked for a short time that summer after I graduated at a radio station, but Uncle Sam was tugging at the coattails, and a friend of mine, who is a member of our American Legion, advised me, he had been a veteran, get Uncle Sam before he gets you. Mm-hmm. I got interested in what's military journalism and also the Armed Forces radio and TV. One group that thought they could get that for me was the Army Security Agency. Now the ASA, as it was called, required a 4-year enlistment.
Right.
But I did that. It was interesting. A few weeks earlier, I had been in college. We were discussing Emerson and Thoreau. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. Emerson and Thoreau. Then after entering in the Army, we were pounding up and down the trails of old Fort Jackson.
Right.
And it was an experience. But I did get at first when I enlisted, they found their opportunities for that journalism were closed. But a lieutenant at Fort Devens, Massachusetts, took an interest in my case and several others, and it was arranged that I would go to a Department of Defense Information School, which was located then at Fort Benjamin Harrison, Indiana, and then on to Okinawa, where I was a military journalist. I wrote articles for hometown newspapers, so-and-so got promoted, such and such a person got a medal.
Oh, sure.
I did all of that. I wrote
We've all seen those in the newspaper. Yeah?
And for the newspapers on Okinawa, civilian newspapers as well as military, and for the Hallmark magazine is the official magazine of the U.S. Army Security Agency. Mm-hmm. I may have been one of the first and only correspondents to get a byline on one of the stories that I wrote. And for my efforts as a military journalist, and also for my work in the Post Chapel, helping put on some dramas and plays and narrating a cantata, I was fortunate enough to get the Army Commendation Medal for my work there on Okinawa, and it was an interesting experience. And
so you were on Okinawa for how long? 3 years?
2 years.
2 years?
Actually, it might have been longer. I was there 70 to 72. And
so that was during the time that there was a big rebellion there, big protest.
Oh, indeed. There was a lot of tension on Okinawa. It's a small island, 19 by 60 miles, and American military bases take up about 1/3 of the bottom part of the island. The Okinawans were very sensitive about that, our extensive use of land. Also, there was the Vietnam War going on. They were afraid of getting drawn into another war. The stationing of B-52s on Okinawa had become an issue. It was just a very tense time. There was some anti-American resentment. I remember my first year there, an American driver accidentally hit an Okinawan pedestrian, but the Okinawans could tell it was an American car because we had different color car tags. So in retaliation, there in the town of Koza, they started attacking all the American cars and setting them on fire. We were restricted to base until that settled down. The riots even made the newspaper here in America. So there was a lot of that anti-American tension going on at the time. And I remember, though, the ASA had required us to enlist for 4 years, but I walked into our headquarters building and a fellow soldier from North Carolina, from Silva. Guy Hall called me over with some good news. Have you heard, Ludy? They're canceling the 4-year enlistments. We get out with only 3.
Oh.
So, which was very good news. I got to come home a year earlier than I thought.
Right.
But yes, Okinawa was a very tense place, a very interesting place. It's a very small island, and during the World War II, when the American forces invaded, the Battle of Okinawa destroyed about 80% of everything above ground on the lower part of the island. Mm-hmm. This is one reason the Okinawans were fearful of getting drawn into another war. Mm-hmm. They remembered when the Iron Typhoon had landed and all the destruction that it caused. It was a very small island, mainly farming, sugarcane farming, and fishing were going on. You know, I was on Okinawa when it reverted to Japan. I was there. It had been decided since the Eisenhower administration that Japan would eventually be able to take over the island, and I was there when that happened. I believe then Vice President Agnew made a visit to the island, and I still, for many years, I still had the newspapers, the civilian newspaper, the Morning Star. It opens up, "Welcome to Japan." Now there were places flying the Japanese flag, and the Japanese yen was one of the accepted currencies off post. Mm-hmm. Now this was interesting. Prior to the reversion, Americans were told to patronize only the establishments that featured an A sign, restaurants and such. That meant they met certain standards of hospitality and fair business practice and hygiene, and that they welcomed American patronage. Well, after the reversion, that could not be enforced, but establishments like restaurants were asked to display an A sign indicating that they welcomed American patronage. Mm-hmm. Some places did not.
Gotcha.
And it was quite an experience of trying to change money into yen. Technically, we weren't allowed to until we were departed the island, but you could always go off post and do that. Mm-hmm. Find places that would change your money into yen. It was quite an experience being there when it was given back to the Japanese. Some of the street signs, road signs would post the speed limit in kilometers, mm-hmm. not in miles per hour. So it was quite an experience being there during that time.
How did you find the people? It sounded like they were not very happy about the American occupation there at that point in time, at that point in their history. I spent some time in Port Yokosuka, Japan, and based there, naval base, and then a significant amount of time in Tokyo, just visiting. But I found that the people to be just generally very sharp and clean and friendly. And well, not necessarily friendly. How about that? Not necessarily super friendly. Civil. That's civil. Right. I have been places where people were just super friendly. The Japanese are I guess I call them the Brits of Asia a little bit. They are have a rich culture. Very very smart people. Just very steeped in their culture. Not super friendly to outsiders. I don't think as far as penetrating that culture. We have a huge debate on immigration here. I don't think that's a problem in Japan. I think my oldest son and I, we were looking at statistics, and he was telling me that in Japan, it's like, it's just there are very few people from other cultures who live there permanently. Okay, period.
Well, the Okinawans were individually very courteous and friendly to the individual Americans.
Okay.
But they resented probably the military presence being there and occupying all of their property. It was interesting. I used to have to work with the command briefings. Okinawa had once, centuries back, been an independent kingdom, but never left in isolation. China and Japan would vie for control of it. Korea would eventually show some interest in the Ryukyu Islands. Eventually, China recognized Japan's sovereignty over the Ryukyu Islands, and the Okinawan king was given some rank in Japanese nobility, but the Japanese tended somewhat to look down on the Okinawans as their poor neighbors. Some Okinawans actually opposed the reversion to Japan.
And everybody else in Asia.
Right. They opposed the reversion. They would have pamphlets printed in English, "Japan is not our fatherland." Right. Even though they had to learn the Japanese language.
Gotcha. They didn't love the fact that they were, so they wanted to be totally separate, the Okinawans did.
It was, but it was such a small island that would have been difficult. It had never been able to defend itself against foreign invaders.
No doubt, yeah.
So the Okinawans had always been dominated or influenced by other cultures around them. They had never been left alone or in isolation.
Right.
And it was given back to Japan because we took it from them during World War II. You know, the Battle of Okinawa was the last major battle of World War II. And some of the Japanese later admitted that when they heard that Okinawa had fallen, they knew that it was all over. It was the last outpost between the American forces and mainland Japan.
Right. And America would be able to set up bases and airstrips and everything else, and just
everything right there.
Just plan operations from there. Sure.
It was called the Keystone of the Pacific.
Right.
Because out of there we had other bases. You were mentioning some of the Asian people being friendly. I went on leave for 9 days to Taiwan, the Republic of China.
I've never been to Thailand.
This is Taiwan.
Oh, I'm sorry, Taiwan either.
Formerly Formosa.
I've been to Hong Kong a couple times, but never mainland China or Taiwan.
Well, the people in Taiwan were very, very friendly.
Right.
Chiang Kai-shek was still alive then, but they knew that if the Americans were not there, their friends over in the People's Republic of China would be coming over to get them.
Right.
So that was one place Americans were very welcome.
Oh, yeah,
they would walk up to you on the street, start a conversation with you. One professor invited me to dinner at his home. I did not get to go. They were great believers in international relations. That was one place.
In capitalism.
Oh, definitely. You know that little Taiwan, capitalistic Taiwan, outproduced Red China.
Oh, for
capitalist China.
I'm sure
they did. And I had one time I was at a PX. I needed to cash a check. I heard sirens coming by, passing by. It was General Chiang Kai-shek on his way to work. He had not left the country since becoming the ruler. His wife, Madam Chiang Kai-shek, had. That was quite a good experience visiting Taiwan. Oh, I shouldn't tell this, but I will. The Chinese, though, did pirating. They would pirate American books and records and reproduce them illegally in spite of the copyright. We were not supposed to send them through mail, but you could take them out of the country, hand carry them, and put them in your luggage and bring them home. So I brought home some books and records and such, and two of the books were textbooks that one of my professors at University of Oklahoma had contributed to. I never told him I had pirate copies of that book. It had been unsuccessful.
Right.
But that was one experience, and people would go there and get teak wood furniture, things of that sort, and bring them back. It was quite an experience there.
Awesome. I mean, you know, I wish I could go to Taiwan. I think that would be an interesting experience, and one of the, you know, just a real holdout in that region for capitalism and free market enterprise. If it weren't for, they better be nice to the Americans. If it weren't for the Americans and the people the allies that are standing, you know, in Europe, the Europeans that are standing up for them, then it would not be Taiwan. It would be China, right?
It would be. China. Getting back to Okinawa, one thing we experienced couple of summers there were the droughts. It would get very dry. We would have to ration water. Sometimes you could buy jugs of water, and sometimes to purify water you had to put chlorine bleach in it. We had to go through that. We would pray for rain. We would pray for a typhoon to hit. One typhoon did, Typhoon Vera, but it was Vera little help. It just filled up the reservoir a little bit.
Right.
They had a problem there with water rationing, and it was odd. You're surrounded by the ocean on all sides. I think they had a ship on the way over to do desalinization.
Water everywhere, but
not a drop to drink. They should have practiced some desalinization or something to get fresh water over there, because we had to ration water.
Right. Interesting. Doesn't sound very healthy to drink the chlorine bleach water.
But you just put a few drops in there. Well, you put chlorine bleach in the water, or chlorine in the water at the swimming pools and such. So it's the same type principle. That's how you purified the water. And the island was very poor. They still had open benjo ditches where they dumped their sewage. It just went right out there. It was there in the open, and we had to get accustomed to some of that. Some of them did have sewage, but
have you been back to Okinawa anytime?
No, I haven't.
That would be a neat experience, I'm sure. I wonder how things are now compared to how they were.
I believe they have closed a couple of smaller bases, but there is still, I think, a lot of anti-American tension over there. They do have the jobs that the American bases provided. Many of them worked there. So if those bases all left, those people would be out of work, and it resulted in a higher standard of living. So they have a catch-22 situation. They don't like the Americans there, but they like the bases there providing jobs
Right.
for them. They can work as cooks and such in the NCO clubs and officers clubs. They can work as houseboys. They can work in the PXs. They love that, but they don't like the Americans.
Sounds like they
being
don't
there.
maybe love the Japanese either, but maybe can tolerate the Japanese more than the Americans.
Maybe, but it would be an interesting situation. Some of the Okinawans remembered being drafted into the Japanese army during World War II.
Right.
And incidentally, while I was there, they had caught a Japanese, maybe it was in the Philippines, they caught the last Japanese soldier who hadn't surrendered. The one in Okinawa, they caught the last one in 1959.
Wow.
He was a holdout, but he did his duty to the emperor. He did not surrender.
That is nuts. I mean, just living in caves or something. Is that what?
Certainly, living in caves and in the wilderness areas,
Sure.
things of that sort.
Like dedication.
They were dedicated. They would not surrender. Of course, in Okinawa, one place to visit was the Suicide Cliffs, where the Japanese generals refused General Buckner's invitations to surrender. They drank toast to the emperor and committed harikari.
Yeah.
Their lesser officers had to be the ones who would surrender.
Sure. I mean, that was one of the things that made the Japanese such a fierce foe in World War II. Was, again, very sharp, very sharp. Also, just the commitment and dedication till the end, till death, and not scared to die for country or the emperor was unparalleled. I'd say, wouldn't you?
It was. If I may get back a minute to the Battle of
Sure.
Okinawa, even while we were there, they had a company that had to explode ordnance because undetonated ordnance,
Right.
shells, bombs, grenades, were still found all over the island, left over from World War II, old but still deadly. Somebody
Yeah.
plowing a field or something would come across a hand grenade or a bomb or something,
Call it in.
and there was a special unit that was assigned just to do that, just to take that stuff and explode it.
Mhm.
That's the result. That was the incredible result, and that again was why the Okinawans were fearful of getting drawn into yet another war.
Well, at least you weren't on that team. On
Well,
that
thank
doing that
goodness.
job.
That was
The
a
hand
very
grenade
frightening job, going out recovering shells, bombs.
Like, hey, go
ordnances.
get that hand grenade and see if
Oh,
you can
yeah.
blow it up.
They were
You
old.
get it.
They were old, but they were still deadly. And
Oh, I bet.
sometimes, when the tide was low, you could see the remains of where some possibly American soldiers had fallen through the coral during the invasion, American Marines, and had died there. They still had some old Japanese bunkers and such there on the island. They were still very much aware of World War II. Still a very vivid reminder of it.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, how the world changes almost so quickly. My grandfather was in World War II,
My father
and
was.
now Japan's a great ally. I mean, we kind of
Oh yes.
we certainly invested in rebuilding Japan. There's no doubt about it.
Well, it would have changed a lot from the time my father was there during
Right.
World War II. He talked to me about it to the time I was there.
Mhm.
And he knew the mayor of one of the towns over there after the Japanese had surrendered. But their ways were somewhat different from ours. One interesting thing about it that people love to do, that I did, go to one of at least two restaurants that served Kobe beef, as it was called. They would cook it on the table in front of you and marinate it and cook it, and they would ask you how you like your steak.
Right.
And they would cook it all on the table. The theory was, some people argue it wasn't true Kobe beef, which originated in Korea, beef that was raised on beer. They'd take the young calves and feed them just beer and get it very tender.
Wow.
And there were two places that did that, Sam's Anchor Inn and Ozeki's in, I think, Koza, I think.
Did you ever have any steak tartare?
Yeah.
Did you ever have any steak tartare with Kobe beef? Which
No.
is like raw steak that you can eat, right?
No, I never had that.
Okay.
I noticed some of them did, and also in Taiwan.
I have had
they,
that.
They would eat octopus,
Yeah.
octopi.
Okay.
They would have it there.
I'm not a big fan of octopi or squid.
But they did have it there. I did not visit this place, but there was a small leper colony or something. And there was an orphanage. There had been a small leper colony. There were orphanages there. Some of the GIs would visit the orphans and help take care of them.
So, you were a journalist in the military and still do a lot of creative things and writing and acting and I mean, the world's greatest playwright, right?
The world's greatest
undiscovered playwright.
But we have a playwrights group that I helped found that meets in Hendersonville, the Lost Playwrights.
Okay.
And we're expanding out. We're going to do some promotions for the Hendersonville Library.
Right.
And some people from even here in Shelby have gone to that. Brendan LeGrand, who does documentaries, Tom Bennett from Kings Mountain, North Carolina, who writes plays.
Right.
People of that sort have gone up there and enjoyed the visits very much.
Phenomenal. How many plays have you written?
Oh, I would have to stop and count if you include the one acts, but some that have been produced twice in Rutherford, once in Rutherford County, once at Crest High School. The Diary of Faust with gypsies, werewolves, a secret society with the Book of Forbidden Knowledge. And there's the play The Ballad of Nancy Hanks, which has been done twice. We proved that Abe Lincoln was born in Boston,
Gotcha.
not in Kentucky.
Right.
That one has been done. And I started out doing readers' theaters based on the Book of Luke and the Book of Ruth. I got permission from the Thomas Nelson people to use the New King James Version for the Book of Luke, and from the American Bible Society to use the Good News Bible for the Book of Ruth. I started out doing that. We did an O. Henry trilogy. We basically were almost like stage readings of 3 O. Henry stories, and we had his next of kin up there at the time. He was still alive, Pastor Paul Porter, and he gave a talk about O. Henry.
Right.
So we have done these things, and here in Shelby, we did for a season opener for the community theater, one of my plays, Hello, Johnny Appleseed, and we also did I did a series of 5 one-act musicals. We did 3 Jolly Coachmen. I got a grant from Charlotte.
You've written hymns as well.
Oh yes,
Musicals,
been done in the
You've written
churches.
hymns, yeah.
I did a play we did at the Lutheran Church about children who build a nativity scene but can't get permission to put it up anywhere. And we did 2 hymns from that. Peter Strickland, who teaches at Crest High School, teaches music, does the music for most of my work. And he did the arrangements, composing and arrangements for some of these.
So how do you get from, I guess, I can see it, but the military, we think of just people with guns and things. I try to tell and talk about on this show and talk about, in the military, and I'm not advocating everybody join the military by any means.
Right.
It's been a benefit in my life because it helped me get away from home, just getting away and seeing the world, going all over Asia, the Middle East, living in San Diego and other places. Those things just expanded my vision of what the world is, more than you really get from watching television or getting the heck out of town for a while. It was very good for me, and knowing that it's a big round world out there, okay, and then also seeing that you can do any job you want really in the military, okay, any job in the civilian world you can really do in the military if you strive to do it. Like it sounds like you had a little bit of work to do to get into that journalist position, but you quickly got there. And do you think that benefited you in any way throughout your life?
Absolutely. It was a fantastic experience. I had a feeling of success. I was, in a sense, a published writer.
Sure.
I got to write
off
some
the bat.
great stories about interesting people. One fellow was a volunteer Boy Scout leader. We did stories on him. One was a military policeman who re-enlisted on Law Day.
Oh, right.
There were just all sorts of fascinating stories in there when you get into this. And talking about being able to travel, I was stationed for a while at Fort Devens, Massachusetts, would go into Boston on weekends, visit the historic sites. I got to see some good theater. I saw Pearl Bailey do Hello, Dolly, for example.
Sure.
I met a lady who was one of the Mayflower descendants. I have an autographed copy of her book, Boston in My Blood, bought at the oldest continuous bookstore in the United States.
Gotcha.
And then I was at Fort Benjamin Harrison, Indiana, where, by the way, the American Legion national headquarters is there, Indianapolis, and I got to visit Indiana on weekends.
I wonder if Ben Franklin ever used that bookstore.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I wonder how old it is, because he was just an avid reader that did different things to trade and find books and get books, but didn't stay in Boston. I think he left Boston. I want to say he was maybe 13.
Philadelphia. But I bought some interesting books there, including
in New York. I've been to New York for a while and then to Philadelphia.
Yeah. And I got copies of The Phantom of the Opera, and I got a book of Gone with the Wind, illustrated with scenes from the movie. And I met one of the actors, Rand Brooks, who played Scarlett's first husband. He autographed it for me. So
right.
He played Charles Hamilton. So being around the historic spots of Boston was an experience.
Yes. And just to me, I mean, you know, when you've gotten out of town and you traveled, you know, especially when you live other places, I just think it does something for you that you can't get otherwise. That you just bring back with you just this sense of a different perspective than if you just look through your lens from just one place on earth the entire time.
Some of my friends at University of Oklahoma, fellow English majors.
Because you went to Oklahoma after you got out of the military.
Right, I went there to get my master's, going under the GI Bill.
Master's in what?
English.
In English.
And the Army, the GI Bill made that possible. Some of the fellow graduate students were sitting around talking. It was tough to have been in the military, but one of them said, well, the military is an experience. You have to live through MASH to write about it. And this goes back exactly to what you're saying. And the folks who had been veterans in college had different perspectives on life from the kids who came there right out of high school.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because they had seen the good and the bad parts of the world.
Plus they had had a job for a few years and gotten some maturity under their belt.
And responsibility and such as that. Yeah. Which is always a good experience.
I figured out really quickly the only difference between me as an enlisted Navy guy and a naval officer was a piece of paper. A college degree, right? And you know, whether I was smart enough or not, you know, it wasn't going to get me into an officer's position unless I got that piece of paper, and that was something that became really, really important to me. It was already, but it just, you know, I think my father says the same thing about his enlisted experience in the Navy.
Well, I can say that about mine.
It's inspirational.
I was determined to go on and get my master's degree after that, and this made it possible. We used to have a joke that among the enlisted men, the difference between the enlisted man and the enlisted man works for a living. The officer doesn't.
The same joke in the Navy. Yeah. I worked for a living. Yeah. But certainly some good officers, right? And there's a lot of value in networking and playing golf on base, right? We had some good golf courses on the bases in San Diego, no doubt about it. Especially the one on Coronado where I was stationed.
Oh boy.
On North Island, so it was not a bad place to be.
I had some good friends. We had some Navy people stationed where we were. I got to be good friends with them and respected them very much.
Sure.
They were people who knew their trades and knew it well.
So it sounds like the military for you was something you wanted to get ahead of by enlisting and controlling your fate. You wanted to, you know, get something out of it as well, in exchange for you saying, look, you can use me for so many years in enlistment or commission. You know, I'm going to possibly, you know, put my life on the line here, you know, for you. In exchange for that, they gave you the GI Bill. I have veterans health care benefits also, because I was served during wartime and was in a war zone during a wartime event. How about that?
I was not in a war zone, so I have trouble qualifying for that, but I was in during that time.
Sure. But there are tons of different benefits that you can get from being in the military that can last you for the rest of your life, and you got your graduate degree because of it, was able to pay for it, and I used the GI Bill going through to get my Juris Doctorate and my MBA. So you know, great experiences. I'm an admirer of how prolific a writer you are.
Well, thank you.
You know, I've written Saving the Farm and a book called Rockstar Lawyer that's over there in the corner. And we had a book signing this past Saturday morning in Kings Mountain. That was fun to go to at the library there.
Well, I certainly admire the work that you do, getting information out to the people about elder law and things they might not be aware of.
And veterans benefits.
And veterans benefits.
And I know you're a big leader in American Legion here in Shelby. Also.
Well, I have worked with their oratorical contest, which is very important. High school students get to participate in this. They make a speech about the U.S. Constitution, and then they have to do an impromptu type speech on one of the amendments. We pull out which one it is. We've had one winner go on to become the state champion and go on to participate in Indianapolis in the national finals. So this contest is something.
Gabe Turner?
Gabe Turner.
Excellent speaker.
Excellent young man.
Ridiculous, yeah. Very talented young man.
There are no losers in that contest.
Right.
Everybody who participates is a winner.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for all that you do in our community,
My pleasure.
for our American Legion post, and for your service in our military.
And thank you for your service.
Oh, absolutely. And thanks for being on Lunch with a Veteran. We'll have someone else next week. It will be Jim Quinlan, next week, who's also very involved in the American Legion Fund.
Very much.
Yes, so thank you. Tune in next Monday at noon. Ludy Wilkie, the world's greatest undiscovered playwright. All right? Okay. If somebody wants to see any of your plays or learn more about what you do, where can they go?
They can contact me, ludy@shelby.net.
ludy@shelby.net. Thanks, guys. Tune in next week.